What's up, everybody? Welcome to Claiming Christianity. Today, I want to talk about the Lord's Day. Most likely Sunday for most of us, but that's something we're going to talk about today. I want to get into it. Before we do, my name is Steve. Welcome to Claiming Christianity. While you're here, you're going to be encouraged and equipped to be the Christians you claim to be. We're going to do that by going through Scripture and reviewing solid tools and resources to help make your day-to-day better and more Christ-focused. That sounds like something that's interesting to you. Click on that subscribe button and let's get into it. So today we're talking about, if you haven't guessed it, the Sabbath. This is something that has been kind of stewing or simmering, if you will, in me for the last handful of months. And if I was being honest, really the last couple of years. And it's something I want to talk to you about today. What you're not going to get is a solid answer on what the Sabbath looks like, because I want to be careful to not become legalistic. But I want to ask you a question right off the top. Does the Lord still get a day? Or does the Lord only get an hour? Now, before you click off, I know that question is probably somewhat convicting already, and it has been for me in the last few months, and like I said, really few years, and it just so happens Alistiar Begg is preaching through some of these thoughts and ideas. So I'm gonna point you towards his channel, and I'll probably, if I'm able to, drop a link down in the description to this sermon series that he's doing on Truth for Life. But I want to get into the Sabbath, what it is not, and do we need to celebrate it, or do we need to follow any specific rules when it comes to the Sabbath? And the goal today is to be encouraging, Christians. The goal is to encourage you, if you don't already, to give a day to the Lord and to take the day of rest that He has given you. Now, if you're watching this channel and you are a Christian, you're very familiar with the Decalogue. That would be the 10 Commandments. And the fourth commandment, coming from Exodus 20, would be, remember the Sabbath day, keeping it holy. So the question is, are we still bound to that? So let's do a little tiny bit of background homework. This is going to be really kind of surface level, for lack of a better term, just because I want you all to go back and study this on your own and to be encouraged to do that. But the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, all 9 of them, I didn't word that correctly. 9 of them have been what some referred to as carried over. That would be they were repeated in one way, shape, or form in the New Testament. So we know for sure that those carry weight. Wherever you land on this argument, those 9 for sure have been repeated. They're commandments that also occur in the New Testament. So we know as Christians, we are still bound to those. Why do I word it that way? Well, because we are not the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel, as is talked about and foretold in Exodus, right, in ancient Israel, that's a special, unique group of people that we are not. We're not going to get into that on this video. But some might claim that we are not bound to the law any longer because of Christ. They would indeed be correct. We are not bound to the law like the nation of Israel was bound to the law. They were bound to the law in a unique way. They must follow it. And you can read all about that in the New Testament. However, Christ says, I came to fulfill the law. What does that mean? Does that mean we don't have? No, there's a whole lot we can learn about the law, even though we are not legally bound to it anymore. But I want to be careful in saying that because, for one, at least, and this is somewhat of a rabbit trail, making sure we understand that just because it's in the Old Testament doesn't mean it's not things that we need to read, understand, and follow. Because one of the things, amongst many, that we can learn from the law, we can learn from these 618, is that right? 618 or 619 laws of the Old Testament, the Mosaic Law, is that God cares about everything we do. Sure, we can eat shellfish now, but we ought to be concerned with what we're putting in our mouth. because God cares about what we're putting in our mouth and what we're putting on our body. And that's just one of the things we can gain from the law is God's character, what he sees and what he cares about when it comes to life. And the 10 Commandments or the Decalogue kind of oversees or is an overarching law that encompasses a lot of those things. And keeping the Sabbath day holy is one of them. Now, I mentioned 9 are what might be referred to as carried over. The Sabbath day happens to be the only one that's not. And some will claim, because of that, that we no longer have to follow that rule. Now, I'm going to say this. I think you should be careful. If you're coming at this from that point of view, I respect and I want to hear your opinion. However, I think you should be careful when you say that because keeping the Sabbath day holy is still a part of God's word. And I think there are still things that can be learned from that. And one of my questions leading into this few minutes worth of a video here to get us thinking today is why? If you're not celebrating the Sabbath and you're not giving the Lord a day, a full day, why? Why is that? And that's what troubles me is there is no good answer for that most of the time. There are a few exceptions that I'll mention here in just a little bit. So I will say this, recapping the last few minutes, no, as we're not the nation of Israel, we are not bound to the law, but the 10 Commandments are still very much part of God's word that we ought pay attention to. 9 of the 10 are carried over in the New Testament, so those are clearly something we ought to follow. And if we're not following the Sabbath rules, we ought to be asking the question, why? Now, let's go just a little bit further as far as Old Testament history goes and how the Sabbath kind of got messed up by people, and those people would be the Pharisees. Okay, the Pharisees had all kinds of rules and regulations based on the Sabbath. And the rules and regulations became crazy. They were much far stricter and much more in depth than anything that God had intended. Right now, today, I have been in hotels and hospitals in some areas that are very, very Jewish in nature, or Jewish hospitals that the elevator, there's like a Sabbath elevator that stops on every floor so you don't have to press the button because that would be work. That is not as what was intended by the law. Okay, that's not what was intended by God, and that's why the Pharisees were always getting in so much trouble. But for the last few minutes of this video, I want to talk about the why. And I want to talk about a little bit what's been simmering inside me as far as what I might be able to change, how I might be able to give a day back to God. That sounds funny because they're all his in the first place, but I want to honor him in everything that I do. And I've been convicted with about things and activities that I participate in on what might be called a Sabbath day. And I wonder if some of you have had these thoughts and have had these questions too, or maybe you need encouragement to do that. So before we get into that, first of all, if you're getting value, hit that thumbs up button. But I want to know down in the comments, do you celebrate a Sabbath in one way, shape, or form? Do you give a whole day to God or do you not? Do you not think that's important? I want to know what you do so we can learn from you. But let's talk about why this has come up. One of the reasons is because some days as I'm driving home from church on Sunday, I look around and every ball field, every soccer field, every baseball field, every football field is full of kids from the age 5 all the way up to their parents and grandparents watching baseball games, taking part in soccer practices, and multiple times there are tournaments happening where they have 2 or 3 games in a day. And that bothers me because that has taken over life. Even some, and I use this term and it's going to sound judgy and it's not, well-meaning Christians are spending most of their day, most of their time on the ball field. And that leads me to believe that they're willing to spend their time everywhere else. So this isn't a judgment just on sports. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with where we're spending our time. And are we giving the Lord back a day? And if we're not, why are we not doing that? I hear, and I even have family members who have so much sports going on that they work God in. Are you working God into your schedule, Christian? You're wrong. I'm just going to call you straight out and say that. If you got to find a Saturday night service because you have too many sports on Sunday, you're just wrong. It's that easy. It sounds mean, and maybe I'm sound like I'm being judgy, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to encourage and equip you to take a step back and to look and say, look, I'm working God into my schedule. We go on Saturday afternoon. We go on Saturday night because my church offers a Saturday night service. I go Sunday morning at 7 a.m. because I can't go at noon, or I go to the Sunday night service so I can be on the ball field on Saturday night. Saints, that is working God into your schedule. That means you fit him in where it's convenient for you, which means you're not showing up to worship in the first place. And I want you to experience the joy and the happiness that is giving the Lord a day. Sitting back and resting in the gospel, not just working him in where it's convenient for you, because it gets far too easy to just start missing altogether. It gets far too easy to stop showing up. You're not developing the relationships that the church is intended to create. The church is the bride of Christ. And we're intended to be together. We're intended for corporate worship, to spend the day worshiping him. By the way, the church service is not for seekers. We're happy to have them there, and we want them there to learn and to experience the gospel. But the worship service is intended to show up to worship God. It's not to have the best music in town. It's not to happen when we want it to happen. And I've been convicted about a lot of these things. I've wondered if we can be doing better, and by we I mean even my own family. Now, my church happens to only have one service, and we're on the smaller side, which is fantastic. I actually love that because I get to have relationships with everybody in my church. I get to see them all serve and to see them all use their spiritual gifts. From the members, and yes, members, we do not hire this job out, from the members that clean the bathrooms and sweep and vacuum the floors, to the members that are on the music team, to the members that are elders and deacons. We all have roles and responsibilities, and we all get to share in that by being a part of a church and not just working it into our lives. And then some Sundays we stay afterwards to pray, which we should be people of prayer, and then there's home fellowships, hopefully during the week, or some type of discipleship smaller group that you're a part of where you can really interact and serve each other on a personal basis, maybe where somebody gets sick and you can bring them food, or they need to be driven to an appointment or a hospital because they're older, and your smaller group can help to do those things. That's how the church was designed. But a lot of that stems from, again, this stewing that are we spending the Sabbath day doing things incorrectly? And now I wonder if, and for me, this is a few of the things that have come up that I'm wondering about for myself is, does that even mean not shopping? Now, like I said in the beginning, I don't want to get legalistic about it. That's why I'm really curious on how you celebrate the Sabbath, what you do or don't do. So let me know down in the comments. But does that mean for me, because I've been convicted lately when I have to stop at the store, do a Costco run on Sunday, and I spend an hour and a half in Costco, and that certainly is not being spent to the glory of God. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. Not at all. But I'm certainly not there focused on God, spending time with my family, meditating on the week, getting rest for the week to come. The body needs rest. The mind needs rest. And the days are his. We jam-pack all the other 5 or 6 days, really. We jam-pack all the other 6 days full of stuff. Places to go, things to do, homework assignments to complete, job opportunities to make sure we get or we miss. And then that has carried over, at least in my country. I'd like to know what you do. If you're not from the United States, I want to know how this goes for you. But at least in my country, we've started jam-packing Sundays full of that stuff too. Sunday is now a work day. Amazon delivers on Sunday. Every single business is open on Sundays. I do know that, except for Chick-fil-A. I know that there are places in the country that essentially a lot of things are closed. I lived in Canada for a short amount of time, right outside of Calgary, for about a year. And one of the biggest blessings, it was a small town, but one of the biggest blessings was that almost everything was closed on Sundays. So we all went to church. What church you went to? We all went to church. We spent time together as families and with fellowship, like after church, having what might be called a big Sunday brunch or lunch, afternoon. And then we went home and took naps and enjoyed each other's company. I was in school, so we just kind of hung out together, maybe got a little bit of studying in, and the studying happened to be Christ-focused because it was a Bible school. But that was really nice. It refreshed us. It got us ready for the next day. It gave me an opportunity to reflect on the sermon and talk to my family members about that. So that's what I've been thinking about lately. And do you celebrate a Sabbath? Do you find it necessary or do you find it not? And the biggest question that I hope that I've encouraged you to think about today is, if you're not doing that, why not? Because I see far too many people in my own life that just have better stuff to do than to give the Lord an entire day. And we walk around thinking that an hour is enough. And then we wonder why our lives are complicated and why we're not grounded in the peace and the joy of the Lord. When really we show up for that hour to go to church, to say that we went to church for the week. Probably during half that time, we were thinking about a dozen other things, what we're going to eat for lunch, what we're going to do later that day, whether we're going to make it to the game on time, what our work on Monday has to be. Whatever it is, you're sitting there thinking about something else. So are we really even giving him that solid hour instead of spending the whole day, the Sabbath, the Lord's Day, to keep it holy? Even though you might not be bound to that Old Testament law in the definitions of those words that Google would give you, I do believe that we are bound to honor the Lord with our lives. If you are a Christian, you're a part of the bride of Christ, and that means corporate worship. You cannot truly claim Christianity if you're not an active participant in a church and in using your spiritual gifts in that way, serving each other, struggling with each other, celebrating with each other. That's what we're designed to do. Now, I did mention that there would be some exceptions, and I want to mention those here as we close today because it's important that you understand there are people that have to work on Sundays. I hope that they get one day of the week that they can spend in reflection to the Lord. And I mention that because I was one of them for most of my life, and that would be first responders. Personnel that are in the military. Okay, for some of you know this, I was a paramedic. Some days you got to work on Sunday, and that's okay. That's okay. It's necessary, but those are the exceptions. Firefighters, police officers, some governmental, rules where you got to work on Sunday because somebody has to open the hospital doors. I'm certainly thankful that there are doctors and nurses willing to work on their Sabbath to protect me and my family. But again, those are the exceptions. Most of us don't have those jobs. Completing a business meeting on Sunday so you make $1 million, that's not a valid exception. So, sounds like I'm hollering at you here today, and that wasn't the intention as I started this. But sometimes we need to wake up to the reality of our actions and where we're spending our time. You want to know who and what you worship? Look at your calendar and look at your bank statement. Where are you spending your time and where are you spending the money? And are you giving back as a Christian? Are you claiming to be a Christian and are you giving him an entire day, or is that just too much for the Creator of all things? I want to thank you for taking your time to tune into Claiming Christianity today. People are asking how they can support this ministry. I work hard to try to put solid content out there for you guys, and I have a couple of quick and easy ways. Number one is always prayer. We want to stay Christ-focused here and make sure that the content we're putting out is biblically accurate. So, super free way that you can support this channel is to click that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you're not already, even share it on your own social media. Those are super quick and easy ways to make sure this video gets out in front of other people that might be interested in content just like this. And number 3, there is a link to my PayPal account down in the description. Those gifts are much appreciated. I thank you for those of you who have given in the past, just to help this ministry continue to put the content out there, to keep making this video, and hopefully encourage and equip others to be the Christians they claim to be. Thank you so much.